Hi everyone, I have some updates to share. I now have a ketone meter that looks like this. Since I started measuring my ketones every day, I have made some discoveries that are very interesting. So I have realized that my ketone levels actually weren't as high as I thought. So initially, I was following a kind of a generic keto macro proportion. 75% of my calories were coming from fat, 4 to 5% of my calories were coming from carbs, and then the rest was coming from protein. And since I started measuring, I've realized my ketone levels are actually not in the range that I want them to be. So the first night I tested, I was just a little bit too excited about testing. So actually I didn't wait long enough after eating to test. So my ketone levels were actually showing 0.2, which is not even within the nutritional ketosis range, let alone the therapeutic range. So I have to aim for above 1.5 for the therapeutic range. So something between 1.5 to 3 is considered the therapeutic range. So that night I was a little bit shocked, even though I knew that just having eaten would have affected it. But anyways, the next day I measured it. I measured my baseline after in a fasted state. So I woke up and waited for the dawn effect to pass. So the dawn effect is the phenomenon of having elevated blood glucose levels in the morning because your liver is getting you ready for the day. So I tested at 12 o'clock and my ketones were showing 1. So I was a little bit closer, but still not a great baseline. So I've decided to reevaluate my macros. I did a little bit more research. So I'm actually reading Dr. Georgia Eats book, Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. She has a section on how to calculate your macros. So, but I'm still reading the book, so I'm not there yet, but I decided to visit that section sooner when I discovered this. After reading that chapter on calculating your macros, I upped my fat ratio to almost 80% from around 75%. And that seemed to have made a difference as quickly as within a day. So I log all of my food on Chronometer, so I know exactly the macro ratios of each meal. So I started having fattier meals. I reduced the amount of protein a little bit, but just adding more fat on your plate isn't enough necessarily. So you shouldn't be overeating proteins per meal either. Well, my carbs are always below the 20 grams of net carbs. So I never exceed that. But that's not enough. So you have to watch out for the proteins you consume apparently. So I've noticed the changes, and I've also seen it on ketone meter as soon as I've made those changes. So I reduced the amount of protein for each meal and increased the fat amount. So how did I increase the fat? I added avocados to those meals. I added more ghee, more olive oil to my salad. I also reduced my portion of the protein element of that meal. So previously, I think I've realized I was overeating the protein because of the results I tested right after eating, or 1 hour after eating, because right after eating isn't a good measure because it's just your levels, your glucose will be too elevated and your ketones will show way too little than your baseline. So I started adding more fat. Quickly I started seeing measures above 2. So the next measurement I took after increasing my fats for the 2 meals, and I waited 3 hours after my last meal and tested, my ketones were 2.2 already. So within that same day, I was able to get it to the levels I want them. So that's my, like, you have to watch out for the protein, even though my carbs are like extremely low. You still have to watch out for the protein. And the other thing that's important is the macros of each meal. So before, I was kind of trying to balance my macros by trying to stick to my basic macro proportions for each day. So I was trying to hit those macros by the end of the day as opposed to for each meal. So if I had a protein heavy lunch, I was having a more fat and carb heavy dinner. If I had 0 carbs for breakfast and lunch, then I was having my 20 grams of carbs for dinner. So I've noticed that this is not a great method, because then you get your levels drop below that baseline you want to be for at least a period of time after eating a protein heavy meal. So that's the other thing that I've noticed. So I tested once again this morning after having a protein heavy meal, even though I knew after adjusting my overall macros for each day, I still didn't think that it should matter that much whether I'm sticking to my macros for each meal. I ate a big bowl of like meat with like lots of fat in it, and a cucumber lettuce salad with some olive oil in it. So it had quite a bit of amount of fat in it. I knew that like per meal it was exceeding my macro proportion. So after that meal I tested, and my ketones were 0.5, which is again within the nutritional ketosis range, but not in the therapeutic ketosis range. So that's not great. Like, you don't want to be kind of up and down all the time. Again, I waited to do that test for about 2 hours. Yeah, that's the other point. Basically, I would say having a ketone meter for the last 3 days already is making a huge difference in terms of my understanding of how what I eat affects me. When I felt a little bit off in the past, I could never for sure know if it was a food sensitivity reaction or it was my ketones being too low. And then honestly, I wasn't super careful with my protein consumption. I thought I was like still eating ketogenic, which I was eating ketogenic, but the ratios were not hitting the right spot for me. I'm going to do another video testing on camera, but that's it for now.